Hi everyone, it's Bobby here. I just want to take a few moments to touch base on the last few weeks of the semester, but also a few more closing thoughts on Learning Plan 7. I've taken the time to grade everything up to the end of Learning Plan 7, so all the extra credit and things like that. So the first thing I want to do is just reflect actually on the extra credit. So several of you have turned in this extra credit, and I want to encourage the rest of you to do the same thing. It's really going to boost your grade. 30 points is a discussion board and a half. So some of you who are getting C's and B's, that'll boost you probably pretty close to an A. And those of you who are not, who are struggling even more than that, it'll put you back into passing status. So I just wanted to comment on that. The other thing I wanted to talk about too in regards to the extra credit movie is just the fact that the movie does a really good job of incorporating all of the risk and protective factors that we've been talking about all semester and applying them to a different context. The one thing I want you to take note of though in this movie is the recognition that people can experience the same risk factors environmentally, socially, um, etc., but that they can end up having different outcomes. So in this movie, for example, you have four boys who made a choice that had consequences they couldn't even possibly fathom when they made the choice. They were institutionalized, and some things happened while they were in the institution, and it happened pretty similarly to all the boys. We would argue they came from the same neighborhood, experienced the same risk factors, and for the most part had similar protective factors in terms of people invested and things like that. Um, but the outcome for the four boys was quite different. Two of them, quote unquote, made it out okay, and two of them didn't. And so I think it's just recognizing when we look at risk and protective factors, people can experience similar things, but they can cope with it, handle it much differently, depending on just other things that have like resiliency, etc. So just kind of taking that into context with what we talked about this semester. The other thing too I want to talk a little bit about in terms of um, this semester and child abuse and neglect is just again kind of recognizing that child abuse is not something that's easy to understand, and it's not something as helping professionals that's easy for us to make sense of. The one thing I want to say though is, I started my journey as a social worker in Milwaukee, and clearly you can only imagine what things that I've seen in Milwaukee. And before having kids, it was really easy for me to say, I don't understand how anyone could ever hurt a child. I don't understand how a baby could ever get shaken. I don't understand how a mom or a dad or a caregiver can get to that point of exhaustion, frustration, etc., and take it out on their child. It was really hard for me to make sense of those things, and it was really hard for me to look at it from a standpoint of risk and protective factors. Flash forward a few years to when I had my daughter Bella, who's now 5.5. She was a very colicky baby and cried incessantly for hours and hours and hours on end. I still remember doing pretty much anything I can fathom to get her to stop crying. Being a new mom, being exhausted, nursing constantly, just trying to figure out what I was doing. Um, there was one night where she just cried and cried and cried and cried, and my husband and I had tried both things, and we traded off and traded off. And I remember holding her while she was crying, thinking, "This is how babies get shaken." Out of pure exhaustion, frustration, exasperation of why won't you stop crying? Um, Most parents I've ever met with who have shaken a baby have said similar things. I just wanted them to stop crying, didn't want to hurt them. Um, and at that moment, it was like a breakthrough for me, understanding that I could be a loving mom, a loving caregiver, um, a completely devoted parent, but that I got frustrated. And here I got frustrated with this helpless baby who, for some reason, was in pain, was frustrated, was scared, was whatever she was feeling, and I could do nothing to soothe her. And for me, it really made sense to me. Thankfully, I knew enough to set her down. I knew enough to ask my husband to come and take her. I knew enough to do a lot of things besides shaking her. Um, but a lot of our parents and caregivers aren't that fortunate. They either don't have the ability to cope with it, they don't understand what they can do differently, or they break in that moment of frustration, exasperation, or they have substance abuse issues, they have poverty, they have all of these other risk factors that thankfully I didn't have. Um, but I think it's just saying when we look at child abuse and neglect, it's really easy to make people out to be monsters, and there are some, absolutely. And I have worked with a few, in all honesty, who there was no empathy and really no hope of change. Um, but many times I meet with moms and dads and caregivers who are at the end of the rope. Um, and they have this huge, huge stack of risk factors and not much going on to protect them from acting out against their children. I am by no means condoning their behavior, by no means excusing it, and many people who abuse children won't excuse their behavior either. What I am saying is if we can look at it from a perspective of risk and protective factors, how can we increase some of the protective factors? You know, I'm not saying poverty causes child abuse, but it certainly causes stress. And stress is a big indicator of child abuse. Um, so I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of perspective. And I think we as parents, if we all take a moment to be honest with ourselves, we can say we've had moments where we've been frustrated with our children. And maybe we've said things we regret. Um, Most of us know how to stop when it gets to that point of extreme frustration. But just keeping in mind that before we throw the book at everybody, um, that we're all just one choice away. We're all one choice away from making something happen that can really hurt someone and change the course of their life and our lives for the rest of time. Um, so just always keep that in mind. We're just one choice away. Um, and if we operate under that perspective as a helping professional, we'll gain rapport, we'll build relationships, and we'll evoke true change. So with that being said, I just kind of wanted to throw that in, but also keeping in mind we're in Learning Plan 8. We wrap this up May 18th, which is next week. Then we jump in just for a few days into Learning Plan 9, which is risky behaviors. So really, we don't have much time left. We have a little less than 2 weeks to kind of wrap up these last two learning plans and get things situated. So I would encourage you to reach out to me if you're struggling, to reach out to me if you have questions. We do have a competency review that's due in Learning Plan 10. That's due by May 23rd, the last day of the course. And so that's going to be going through and picking 5 of the competencies and kind of reviewing them, also going through some of the things in this semester that have really stuck with you and why. And so just kind of start doing that now as you're wrapping up the last few learning plans. As you're kind of going back through learning plans, kind of go back and, find the things that um, stuck out to you and the things that you have done to meet the competencies. It'll create a lot less work for you in the end. But I'm here for you. I want to encourage you. You're so close to being done, and you can do this. I'm excited to see what you come up with for your competency reviews and to see how all your hard work has come together. So don't give up on me. Don't bail on the discussion boards. Put forth the effort. Continue the work. It'll be worth it, I promise. Um, but I'm here if you need anything. I want to encourage you. You guys rock. I'm so blessed to have been your instructor, and I can't wait to see what else you got coming up here. Thanks again, guys. Have a great night.